Thank you for tuning into From the Cowboy State podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Getz, and today we are joined by Sadie Longhurst. We are going to be talking about all things future of agriculture. So I'm going to go ahead and let Sadie introduce herself, and we are going to get chatting.
Thanks, Michaela, for reaching out and asking me to be on this podcast. Super excited to talk about the future of agriculture, what that looks like. A little bit about me. I grew up on a first generation farm in Southeast Idaho, where we grew alfalfa and wheat, and really just fell in love with the agricultural way of life once I got to high school and got involved with FFA specifically. Until that point, I think I took for granted being on a farm and seeing that lifestyle and the hard work ethic my parents forced me to learn that I now appreciate. But once I got into high school and involved in FFA, I realized that that was the place for me and really found my home there. Went on to be involved with FFA at a state level once I finished high school and served as the state president for Idaho, where I realized I really enjoyed being in the classroom and teaching about agriculture to our future generation, which then led me to Utah State University, where I completed my undergraduate degree in agricultural education. I student taught at Rigby High School in Idaho, and then I also taught at a agricultural high school in Milan, Italy, that focused on agriculture as well. So that really benefited me on looking at the global perspective of the future of agriculture. That then led me to where I'm at now in my current phase of life, where I'm just finishing up my master's degree at Utah State as well in agricultural extension and education. And I actually just successfully defended my thesis last month. So I'm excited to have that completed as well. And now I'm currently just, as it says on LinkedIn, open to work, working with the future of ag. Sorry, that was very long-winded, but that's how I ended up here, being passionate about agriculturalists.
Well, that's fantastic. So you had mentioned that you were on an international trip recently. Was that Milan, Italy trip?
Yes, yeah. So that was one of the unique things I got to be a part of as well. And I'm on assistantship here at Utah State, so been able to help with our agricultural education classes, as well as some of the programs that we offer here at Utah State, such as our international student teaching experience that is based in northern Italy and Milan. And so I went with one of my professors where we were gathering information and experiences from our student teachers that are there from the U.S., as well as the Italian teachers, and most importantly, the Italian students, if it's beneficial for them to have an interaction with American student teachers, because our goal
Hmm.
in sending student teachers there is to help them develop their pedagogy in working with English language learners and what that looks like when they're teaching about agricultural topics to folks that are learning English. And the cool thing about the program is the Italian students are very smart when it comes to agricultural sciences already. So it makes our job pretty simple, if we know the content, just helping them be able to share that in English. So that way it opens up doors for them to find jobs and careers, hopefully in Italy as well as globally. And so it was super fun. I'm a little bit jet lagged, but it was a great experience. Obviously, the best food in the world. Super unique, super cool that we get to do that here at Utah State.
Very neat. So I guess and this is maybe a dumb question, but with all of your history and everything going through your master's, going through your undergraduate, everything like that, and growing up, what do you actually think that you're wanting to do now that you've just
No,
defended your thesis, everything like that?
that's a great question. I ask myself that a lot. I think the one thing that is a constant for me is I just really enjoy telling the story of agriculture, whether that's in a formal
Right.
classroom, whether that's online. My thesis was focused on social media usage by
Oh,
agricultural
great.
teachers, and how they use it to showcase what it is that they do as ag teachers, because I do think that's a breakdown that we have, is that we have these teachers that know so much about agriculture and are pivotal members of the community, but how do they share that online and tell that story to folks that maybe aren't living in a rural setting, or even, sharing that cultural exchange, if you will, between folks that live in an urban area.
Mhm.
So I think for me, if I can find a job that is allowing me to tell the story of ag in some sort of capacity, I think that'd be rewarding for me. I feel a little bit ashamed. My professors tell me not to be, that I'm not sold on going into the high school classroom as of right now. I think for me, it would have to be the right program in the right area and with the right students. And when I say those things, I think for me of just being able to meet them where they are at and finding the place where I can really give my best to the students. And so I'm probably a bit more picky than I should be, but that's where I'm at. I also think it'd be unique to work in an educational specialist role for an agricultural company, but yeah, mostly just, hashtag open to work on my LinkedIn profile.
Right. No, I think that makes total sense. I have a few friends and everything that are ag teachers or FFA advisors, what have you, both down in Texas. And it's difficult. Some days make it really easy, some days make it really challenging, and sometimes they don't outweigh the other. And so
hmm
trying to, or not trying, but being stuck in that where it doesn't, like I said, outweigh it, it's difficult. And I'm really lucky that I'm in this extension role and we have flexibility to create our own programming. We also have some set programming, but we get to create our own programming based off of our own skill set. So having a degree in ag communications on both the bachelor and master's level, I get to have this podcast and put ag education out there to folks, but it fits my skill set and I'm not having to fit kind of a mold if that makes any
hmm
sense. But I can see
For
that being
sure.
a really tug and pull, if
hmm
you will. But no, that makes sense. So I guess, do you have any interest in extension work at all? Or, I mean, I have to ask, but
I think, yeah, I'll be honest. I only did 4-H one year and I showed
oh,
a,
sure.
a lamb. So that's the extent of
Yeah.
the exposure I had to extension growing up. In my master's, I've had the opportunity to take some classes that were focused on extension work, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed them. Yeah, again, probably not the poll as much, just because I prefer working with students versus maybe more of
Adults.
adults. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, again, finding the right position that would allow me to do that, I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah. Just open for anything.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I guess kind of talking about the workforce, everything like that, everything that you've done in your bachelor's and your master's, I feel like you've been exposed to a lot, if that's fair to say.
Yes.
It seems like it, anyways. So, have you been able to see working with industry partners, working with folks overseas, anything like that? Have you been able to see any like automation, any technology changes, anything like that really or I'm sorry, make a change in workforce challenges that maybe we didn't see back in the day, that you didn't see growing up, anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd even call them challenges. They're almost more of a pivot to how we're preparing this next generation to enter the workforce and the different
Yeah.
skill sets they'll have in regards to automation being a part of their career and what job it is that they do. I think it's a learning curve for sure. And I think when I think of my farm operation compared to maybe a large scale, what you would maybe call a corporate farm, the adoption of automation is just harder simply for cost. And so what that
Yeah.
looks like in small ways that you can adopt it. But for me, when I put my ag teacher hat on, the one thing that when we're talking with students is just recognizing that this is now opening up a wide range of careers that weren't there before. I mean, even here at Utah State, we now have a degree that's focused on precision agriculture. I think 5, 10 years ago, you wouldn't even see that, maybe a unit touching on it in an agricultural class, but not a whole major. And I think that really goes to show the way that we're headed is that we've just
Mhm.
got to almost tighten up what we're already doing as agriculturalists and then helping these young folks find, myself included, their place
Yeah.
in that.
Interesting. So with having a whole, I'm sorry, did you say degree program?
Yes.
Yeah. So is that like a heavily attended degree program, or are people seeking that out, or what does that really look like? Because we didn't have that
Um,
back when I was at Missouri State and then even Tarleton. We didn't necessarily have that.
Yeah, I can't say for sure on numbers specifically,
Sure.
but it is more, I think, talked about, shared about, even when we are teaching like our agricultural education students. Like it's not just something that we touch on. It's
Yeah.
a part of everything that we do, and it's almost integrated itself into all the curriculum that we're teaching about, whether it's
Wow.
agricultural communications, animal science, plant science, agronomy, those specific areas. You're going to integrate precision agriculture and what that looks like into each of those sectors when you're
Hmm.
teaching students, let alone that then opens the door for them if they want to do that as a career, whether they're working for, Case IH or John Deere,
Hmm.
and really being the precision ag specialist. Again, I'm not versed enough to know what specific job titles you could
Sure.
have, but definitely something they can focus on and have be their passion and career readiness.
Interesting. So, do you think then, do you see kind of a gap? So, we've got this then that's happening at universities and everything, but then you don't necessarily have producers adopting that into their operations, right? So, not, and part of it's a cost thing.
For
Not
sure.
everybody can go out and go get a new IA tractor. It's just, it is what it is. But so, do you see that being a gap of what's helping people attract and retain young folks into their operations because you have folks who maybe focus in this, excuse me, degree program or integrate that into their degree plan, like what you mentioned, and then there's nowhere for them to go, so they just go directly to the factory.
Yeah, I can see definitely the points you're sharing with that. The one thing that comes to mind for me is I almost think it makes our job as educators easier because that
Sure.
allows us to have a job because
Yeah.
we're going to be needing to educate all generations on, adopting the use of technology. Again, I don't think that's a trend. I think that's a necessity
Yeah.
in any facet, whether it's simply, using an app to turn your pivot on and off that my dad and I go back and forth on all the time, and he's now utilizes and loves it. But my role in that is like educating and teaching efficiency. And so wherever these students that we're teaching that are studying precision agriculture end up, whatever that looks like, I think they have the opportunity to be teachers as well in their own perspective fields and showing how we're still holding on to the old-fashioned traditions that we all love about agriculture, while still integrating and adopting this technology that's allowing us to be more efficient and in turn still keeping us in a job, really. And so that in a long roundabout way that doesn't really answer your question. That's my thought process
No,
when you
it
walk
does
me through
though.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it makes me think so at Wyoming stock growers, but back in December at the stock growers meeting, there was a presentation over the virtual fencing collars, if you will. And it helps with rotational grazing. I think some of them are solar powered, which is really great. You don't have to mess with batteries, anything like that, putting them on a different charging station, what have you. And like I said, they're just, I think, multiple different companies are making them now, but it just makes me think of that. And we had a speaker, not University of Wyoming, but there was a speaker who was giving a spiel about them. And it was just so interesting to just, like you've touched on, learn about this new technology and see the room of folks in there go from, oh, this is another topic to, wow, we could possibly invest in this for our operations. So I think that's just another great example.
yeah, and I mean, you and I sitting here talking about it, like that makes me excited, to be a part of this
Yeah,
industry and recognizing, that it's not something that's in the past that we did, long ago, farming and ranching. No, it's present now and it has a place at the
yeah,
table today in technology and science and all the STEM related fields. It has a seat at the table, and I would argue it's at the head of the table.
yeah. No, I completely agree with you. So let's pivot just a little bit. We're talking about producers, staying competitive, things like that, but let's pivot just a little bit and talk about markets.
For sure.
How do you think, or I guess, what has your experience been with how producers are staying competitive in evolving markets? We've talked about technology a little bit, but have you seen some trends with traveling, your masters, everything like that, everything you've been exposed to, have you seen some changes?
I think one of my favorite things, going first, talking about the positive of like consumer trends when it comes to what they are expecting from producers. One of my favorite things is that it allows us as producers to really build a story and
Yeah.
brand our legacy because I think consumers nowadays more than ever want transparency and local sourcing. And I think that's great if we can do it in the right way and stay caught up on that, right? And again, making sure all generations are happy to share, what it is that we do as farmers and ranchers. And some of the things that come to mind is like social media has allowed us to have a direct line with our consumers that I don't
Mhm.
think we even really had 10 years ago. I think back to like when I first downloaded Instagram, it was not how it is now with the
No.
marketing tool that it is at all.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to see that evolve. And now consumers are that much more accessible to producers and vice versa. And I think we talk a lot about like bridging the gap between producers and consumers, and everyone has their thoughts on what that looks like and how that should be drawn about. But I think for me is really harnessing this social media tool and just making a connection. We're not out there to advocate, and tell consumers what it is that we're doing. Let's just take a moment just to teach. People don't even want
Hmm.
to be educated at. Just teach and share, tell your story. And I think with the trends that we're seeing now, that's becoming more and more easy. One of my favorite things about going to Italy and having student taught there and then now seeing our program is that their food is such a part of their culture as a whole. Like
Okay.
very much, you sit down, you have dinner together as a family every night, and it's not just your immediate family, it's your nonna, your grandma and grandpa, and aunts and uncles if they're around as well. And they eat around like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which is later than the traditional American dinner, but it allows for them to really take the time and take thought into what it is that they're preparing and to just come closer as a family. And I think we could get into the weeds too of, family and community and tying that in with agriculture as well. But for me, that's one of my favorite parts is because they take so much ownership and pride in how food is produced. And that's one of the things I've taken away after having that experience is allowing for our consumers here to take the same pride in what it is that we do as American farmers and ranchers. I think we have the same pride, but just because of how our society is set up, it's not as conducive for that,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And so that's again where I think we harness this social media tool and really, showcase here's what we value. This is the value we're putting into the product we're giving you, and we hope you value it as well as you consume it and enjoy it. No
No,
matter
that's really
what the
great.
Yeah, no matter what the trend is, what it is that they're consuming. But yeah.
No. And you kind of answered one of my questions. I was going to ask if some of the trends that you see are universal from, internationally. And so you've kind of touched on that a little bit, but are there any other trends that you see that, maybe are working, I guess, better over in Europe? It's not necessarily just specific Italy, that's where you were, but are there
hmm
any other things you see that, could maybe work for American producers to adopt, to share stories? Because, like you said, marketing your operation is about sharing your brand, sharing your story. Is there anything you see that we worked really well over there that we don't
Yeah.
necessarily adopt?
Sure, yeah. I think one of my favorite things, I always love going to a grocery store. No matter if I'm in the US or abroad, I just love going and just browsing and seeing what's different than the
Yeah.
grocery store that I shop at at my college town or my hometown in Idaho. And one of the things I noticed this time specifically, before I went on to Italy, I was actually in the UK as well for fun, not for business. But we went to a grocery store in both places. And the thing I noticed on their food, specifically their milk, I remember taking a picture of it in the UK grocery store, is that it told you what farm the milk came from.
Oh, neat.
And I just loved that. I thought that was such a perfect marketing tool. And the one thing I noticed too is there wasn't the alternative milk options. It was cow milk was the main option,
It
and
was. Mhm.
yeah, that's what was there. And so in my mind, I'm wondering if there's not a market for that, if consumers there aren't driving that force, not necessarily. I don't know if it's force is the right word, but driving the trend in that way. They are still
Mhm.
using dairy milk as in their coffee, tea, and etc. How they enjoy that.
Interesting.
But that was really cool for me. And one of the ones specifically I remember is that was from Scotland, and it told you a little bit about the farm, how many miles it took to get to like where they processed it, packaged it, and then took it to this M&S grocery store in the middle of downtown London. And I think if that's the only exposure that someone in the UK had to where their milk came from, I thought that was a very positive outlook
Right.
because that is one of the unique things as well. While I was in the UK, I did get to go to a farm in a roundabout way. That's a story for another time. But while we were there, they talked about the government does not value agriculture, and so after thinking through this and having been to the grocery store, drawing my personal conclusions and opinions, that may be a way the farmer or rancher, dairy producer is telling their stories, paying a little extra to put that on their
Right.
label to show that, hey, we're trying to make a living here. We're really putting some value into this milk that you put
Mm.
into your tea every morning,
Mhm.
because they don't have like agricultural education classes. They don't have an FFA or 4-H for young people to be a part
Right.
of. And so, that was interesting for me to consider and look at when that's why I went to college. That's why I'm in a master's program is because of
Right.
agricultural education. And so to not have that was very, I don't know, my heart really went out to them as well as I listened to the farmer and agronomist that we got to visit with on how how they educate and share with consumers. But for me, that grocery store made total sense that that's where they're gonna try and so be as transparent as possible. And which is what consumers are wanting. They're wanting transparency from us, no matter if you're in the UK, Italy, or Idaho, or Utah, or Wyoming. That is the common theme I've sensed.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's funny that gives you an appreciation because that's the whole reason I have a job is because
Mm-hmm,
of the appreciation of agriculture in the US here.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, no, that's interesting. And it's funny, I see we have a local grocery store here in Powell, Wyoming called Blair's.
mm.
On some of the beef products, it has a label that has exactly what ranch the beef was processed
Oh,
from.
cool.
Not on milk, but we do have some on the beef and pork products, that is neat.
But even
Um,
adding to that, like in Italy, I mean, mozzarella
mhm.
cheese, all the cheeses, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
I love mozzarella cheese here, and I mean in Italy it's just out of this world delicious. But the few that I picked up at the grocery store to enjoy while I was there had the breakdown of, these are the type of the cows that we care for. And I don't know, it's just I see that in certain niche areas in the US, but it's not
Yeah.
commonplace. I see a lot more of like you see like fat free or keto friendly, that type of
Gluten
stuff.
free.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Not
That's
not the
interesting.
storytelling. So that was interesting as
Yeah.
well.
No, it is. It's just kind of taking it and putting a different spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a group of us who had applied for a grant program, a Global Perspectives grant program, and we are going to New Zealand because they have an
Mm,
extension system. So we're
cool.
doing a little bit of research with the UW Extension sheep specialist down there, Whit Stewart. He's on
Mm,
sabbatical doing some specialized, deep research on sheep and the just technology advances that they have down there.
mm,
And we're going down there to meet with him, kind of tag along and do that, learn a lot of info and just what we can bring back. But their extension system is pretty expansive in the way that they cover things. So we're going down there to learn about that. But you just don't necessarily think about countries maybe not having extension
mm,
and,
mm-hmm.
some of that stuff. So that's just
Yeah.
interesting to think about. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes me really grateful, I think. And again, allows
absolutely.
me, as an educator, when you're sharing with students that maybe can't quite catch the vision of the
Yeah.
opportunities that we have here in the US, it's easier to tell, put it into perspective for them of the opportunities that we really have in agriculture and just in general of, the American dream. is
Yeah.
very much still coveted with
Yes.
the students I interacted with, and allowing us as Americans to still recognize that I think is key.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pivot again a little bit here. So if so if you with going through school and everything like this and you just got back, if you could give advice to anybody wanting to maybe step into the agriculture industry, what would that advice be?
Mm. I think just say yes to as many opportunities as you can. When it comes to agriculture, it's a small world, very small.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly amazed at how small it gets. Every opportunity I've gotten to be a part of, I'm like, oh, I've seen this person at this event or what have you. And I think that's the unique thing, but also recognizing that your reputation is going to follow you and your character is going to follow you throughout all of those experiences that you're at. And so building connections and having things that add value to the places that you're at is key. And so I just don't be afraid to put yourself out there, put yourself in a situation that might be a bit uncomfortable. When I went to Italy for the first time, the most abroad I'd been was to Canada because my grandma's Canadian in Carson,
Nice.
Alberta. That's not that very culturally different to where I grew up in Idaho, but it was quite the culture shock to go to Europe and to be in a country that I don't speak the same language, but knew that I was there to do a job and teach about American alfalfa production. And I think that's allowed me to just be a bit more confident in putting myself out there and finding ways to make connections to folks that, again, it's so small that you wouldn't know that you have. And so just say yes to things that may not fit into the exact mold that you have for yourself or even how you view agriculture, and challenge yourself as well. If you have a certain, conception, idea, or concept that you think how things should be done in agriculture, I would challenge anyone to learn the flip side. And I think that just makes you a more well-rounded person in general, but allows you to really develop a skill set that adds value to our industry as well. And I think just most importantly, like agriculture needs your voice. No matter if you grew up on a farm or not, like if you're passionate about it and you've taken the time to really understand what it is that we do, like we need you. We need your innovation, and there's room for you here if you want to add and contribute positively. And I would just say, don't be afraid of what you may think agriculture is. I would challenge you that it's probably not what you think it is, and that's the unique and cool thing about it. And there's just opportunities in all realms of and
Yeah.
sectors. That's what's so cool about it. Even though, and because it's so small, it's very easy to have crossover in all the different sectors, and that's pretty unique to an industry. And so, yeah.
No, I love that answer, especially the last part of there's crossover with everything. And one of the ones that actually one of my coworkers, Haley Sorg, is working on is a Wyoming ag and art tour. And it's one that I never would have pegged or thought of, but she's like, well, way back in the day, you think your biology books, anatomy, physiology, everything like that, those skeletal systems, everything like that, like they used to draw. It was hand
Hmm.
sketched, everything like that. And so
Sure.
you kind of start to bring that into natural resources. And when people used to look at leaves, plants, something
Uh-huh.
like that,
Yeah,
that was all hand sketched. And so it kind of just weaves itself into agriculture. And so we're doing,
that's
like
so
I said,
cool.
these really neat tours. Yeah. And so we're going to have our host sites be operations, like producer operations. And then we're having artists come out and they're going to sell their work and kind of showcase their stuff. And it's kind of neat. So cool little intersection
Hmm.
there.
That's awesome.
But yeah, super fun, little fun day.
Hmm. Hmm. And what
So
we
on
need
the,
too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What you need to just kind of
Hmm.
open that range and open people's eyes.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So, on that same note, if you will, what excites you the most about the field?
I think the blend of tradition and innovation, the image that comes to mind for me is like having this family farm that's been in however many generations, but here's a drone flying across it, mapping
Yeah.
whatever. Like that's pretty epic to be a part of and see, especially as a young person and recognizing that my dad, who's not that old, but considers him, I mean, I would consider him to be an 80-year-old man mentally, what that looks like when him and I come together and talk about what it is I'm learning at college and the experiences he's had.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a ninth grade education, and so to see what he's done in agriculture, for me, I think you can dream big and you can go far. And that's what I think makes me most excited about the future is that any type of person that has some drive and excitement can go so far in this and just industry. And I just think young leaders bring like a fresh energy in areas like agricultural education and advocacy and sustainable practices, what that looks like, and still making sure we pay homage and recognize what has been done in the past. And
Yeah.
that just comes together in such a beautiful way in agriculture that I love to be a part of. I always think of the FFA Creed, and that last line about American agriculture specifically can and will hold true to the best traditions of our national life. And I think that just really sums up what any agriculturalist wants, no matter what side of the table you may be on, or whatever regard we have talking about in governmental affairs, society, political views, all of that. At the end of the day, we all just want to be caretakers of our land and livestock. And that's pretty unique if you want to be a part of that and really contribute. Like, that's pretty awesome. And I think, again, the word epic just keeps coming to mind to have a career in that and to, add what you can.
No, I think that honestly, I think that response is pretty but no, I think that's really great. I never saw myself working in agriculture. I went to school for ag communications, but really it was more on the communication side. I was like, well, I'll just, Missouri State was an ag school, and I was like, well, I'll just go, kind of get my degree, but I wasn't on it.
Mhm.
I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just loved honestly just loved seeing my dad and my grandpa work together. My grandpa would have been the fifth generation on their operation. It was corn and soybeans and everything. And I was like, well, how do you work with these people? But I was like, how do you just work with these folks? And
Mhm.
ended up getting my master's, and lo and behold, here I am working in Wyoming Extension, but it's just been a really awesome role because every day I'm just going out and meeting with folks who just remind me of my grandpa and my dad every single day. And they're just like, hey, what do you think we should spray? Like, what pesticide do you think we should spray? Or what cover crop do you think we should use? And I'm like, those are great questions. Yeah. Or they're like, hey, our horse isn't looking so good, and it's such a wholesome job, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
It makes complete
Sorry.
sense.
I have that like spring cough going around.
Oh, I understand.
But oh yeah. But no, it's just a really great field for
hmm
anybody to work in.
Yeah, I
But
think once you can catch the vision and you feel that wholesome energy that we have,
yeah.
you're hooked. Like
Yeah.
that's what you want to be a part of. And I think no other industry that I've interacted with has that same pull.
No, it doesn't. I was because I'm old. I and my mom listening to this because she'll listen to this episode. She's gonna roll her eyes at me. But I took like an 8-year hiatus before I got my master's, and I was in digital marketing and working with doctors and hospitals. No, it's just not the same. I learned a lot, but it is just not the same, those
Mm-mm.
industries. And then even working with first responders, which was so fulfilling. It was
hmm
amazing work, but it's just not the same feeling.
hmm hmm There's
So,
something to be said about getting some dirt on your hands, both,
yeah.
physically and mentally. And agriculture
Hmm.
allows you to do that. You really get to clear your head and really get back to the basics of why we are as humans, what we're here to
Hmm.
do. And I don't know, that connection to the land, that caretaking mentality of
Yeah.
making things better than how you found them allows for anybody that has anything to do with agriculture to really touch I think their soul, not just them, but their soul.
Yeah, no, the perfect example. Like yesterday, I took posters out to a gal that we work with, and I walked out and I walked into the house after being out there, and I literally but I had sheep like on my shoes, and I was like, well, there you go. You can't ask for anything. Well,
hmm
probably, horse or cow poop, but you can't ask for
Yeah.
anything better than that. So
hmm hmm
no, it's just good stuff. But
Yeah.
all right, well, so what else?
I think just the overarching theme for me of anybody that's in agriculture, considering agriculture, learning about agriculture, anything to do with agriculture is that the beauty of agriculture is that it is a culture.
Yeah,
And I think that really for me just sums up the reason I stay engaged. As I mentioned earlier, I am not quite sure what a specific job or role looks like for me, but I know that it's got to be in agriculture. And even more so, like working with youth in agriculture, just because that really fills my cup and helps me feel like I'm giving. Of my God-given talents in that realm, but just in any aspect of the industry. I think we've talked about, different sectors specifically, but it's a culture in and of itself. And I think it allows for anybody from any other type of culture to be welcome into it just
yeah,
because of how we view and see the world. And so I think that would be just that's what when I'm ever questioning, why am I doing this? Why am I, looking for specific things or, I'm out on a tractor in the sun. It's like, yeah, is this really the life? But it's 2 seconds and I'm already like, yeah, this is the life because I'm
yeah, it
connecting with
is.
nature and, or if I'm in a classroom talking about animal digestive systems, that's maybe a bit mundane, but I see a student that has never heard that,
Mm-hmm.
cows have 4 compartments in their stomach, and that's crazy. And they
Mm-hmm.
actually do chew their cud, like,
Yeah,
and they just have a light bulb moment. And I think that for me sums up what
yeah.
agriculture allows for anybody from any age to really partake of and be a part of.
Or it's like when you're in a classroom and you're explaining to kids where their food comes from,
hmm
and they're like, oh my gosh, because they don't necessarily
hmm
realize it's not just the grocery store or like McDonald's, wherever it is, and their minds are blown. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
As you say this, reminds me of an activity we do through the National Center for Agricultural Literacy is
yeah.
housed at Utah State.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the activities that we have is called Source Search. And so students get 20 cards. They look like playing cards, and they have different products that they use every day. And then we have 4 bins at the front of the room that have factory, farm, the store, and natural resources, and they have to decide where those are located. And we've done it for a lot of different age groups. We've done it with parents, with elementary students, middle school, high school, all sorts of people. And it's interesting what people's responses and reasonings are
Mm-hmm.
when it's majority of them end up getting put in the store or factory bins when actually the right answer is they either come from a farm or are a natural resource. And so I think that's one of my favorite things to do with any type of people to really just
Mm-hmm.
recognize what the food system as a whole looks like, and what it takes to get to your dinner table or what you're wearing every day.
Yeah,
And that I don't know. That's rewarding, I think, in as an agricultural education person, that's where it's at. That's the
yeah,
meat and potatoes of really
yeah,
what fills you up.
yeah. The food and fiber aspect,
hmm
absolutely. Yep.
hmm
I feel like
I
I
guess
had a question.
I have a question for you.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I never get asked
yeah,
questions.
yeah. I think what has been like your favorite aspect of being in the role that you're in with, agricultural extension?
That's a great question. I mean, I would love to say just overall the job, to be fair, because like I said, 8 years I was working in digital marketing. And right before that, for about a year, I was in insurance. And it was just, that typical 8 to 5 desk job, answering phones, making phone calls all day. Just, I don't want to say miserable, but it was just not what I was looking for. It did not fill my cup. In fact, it drained it every single day. And I was
Mm,
constantly looking for other ways to fill it. Now, luckily, I was looking, for other ways to fill it. And for a point, I was living near my folks. And so I would ride with my dad pretty frequently there for a while. And I had a dog at one point. So there were little things like that. But moving into this job, I knew that I would like it because I came up for a site interview instead of just one via Zoom. And
hmm
as soon as I came up here to Cody and Powell, Wyoming, and I saw the mountains, I was like, oh, I'm sold. I'm an outdoorsy person. I always have been. I grew up like hiking, camping, fishing, all of that, especially with my grandpa. But I didn't know how much I would love it. But as far as your actual question and me not rambling, just the job as a whole, the people, my coworkers have made it super easy to step into the role.
Mm,
Technically, I'm only supposed to have one, but I've got a great conglomerate of mentors. Jeremiah, just Mary Louise. Then the role itself, just feeling like I work with my grandpa every single day. I mean, you
mm,
can't beat it. These old farmers up here, producers, so fantastic. And
mhm.
they're so kind. They walk into my office and they just sit down and they're like, so, and we just talk, you know, and I
Mhm.
really feel really fortunate.
That's
So,
awesome.
mhm,
I always love
absolutely.
hearing, different aspects of how, like, I love that you included how you ended up where you did. Because are you from Missouri originally?
Not really. That is where I did my undergraduate degree at Missouri State University. But before that, I was in Illinois.
Okay,
And
cool.
that's where, my grandpa was and everything like that, and where he was born and raised. So, both of my grandpas, actually, both of my grandpas, grandmas, really, my immediate family was all born and raised. Yeah.
Now you're in Wyoming. That's
And
awesome.
now I'm in Wyoming. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so cool.
But yeah. Yep. And we do have our 4-H educator here, Mary Louise. And so I do get to work with her a bit with kiddos and everything, but I do like the adult education aspect because it
Mm,
is just, to me, it's just like talking peer to peer. And
mm,
sometimes they do ask questions and they have more experience than I do a lot of the time. So I'll be like, that's a really great question. Let me get back to you. I don't know, to be fair. So I do
hmm
like that aspect, but the kids are fun.
Finding the area that you
Yeah.
feel like you can give your best, I think that's always key. So that's cool. Cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So just tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, alfalfa specialty? Like
Yes.
what? That's such a
Um,
niche. Like,
yes, it is. Um, yeah, so my dad started farming full time the year I was born in
mm.
2000. Before that, both of my parents grew up in a subdivision. Um, my dad was raised by his grandparents, and had a little bit of interaction. They had like some cows on the property out on the outskirts of town, and so kind of got his first taste with that, and then started working for a farmer during high school, where he ended up, deciding to drop out and do that full time. Just from a family support perspective, was not there, and so
Mhm.
and a blessing in disguise because that's where it's led him today is being a full-time farmer. But really, like that's where he wanted to spend his time was in a tractor. So start farming full time in 2000. Both of my parents uh, decided to quit their jobs that they had. My mom worked for a company called Melaleuca. My dad worked at BMC West hauling lumber. And they took a chance and they were doing wheat and straw at the time and then started to add in alfalfa. And we ended up finding a niche market that we sold our alfalfa to a Wagyu feedlot a couple hours from
Oh,
us.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're spoiled with eating Wagyu beef.
That must be hard, you
Yeah,
know.
real hard, real hard. And so then in high school, uh, I had a couple horses at the time, and I mentioned I got involved with FFA
Hmm.
by accident. My mom and I were sitting down to do my course schedule, and we saw that there was an ag class option. And I was like, "Well, you better take that. I mean, that would make sense. I mean, we're farmers for crying out loud. You better take it."
Hmm.
So I took it. I learned about this thing called FFA. We wear these really, stiff blue jackets that are really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we do that. We have this thing called an SAE project, supervised agricultural experience. Well, I needed small hay bales for my own horse because I got tired of feeding our
Oh.
1-ton bales.
Hmm.
So we borrowed a small baler from one of our friends, ended up baling some of the hay that's just behind our house. I ended up selling out of those bales that weren't for sale because people heard they were there. So we ended up selling them. And I realized that there
Nice.
was a need in the area. So that became my SAE project. My parents were all about if I wanted to go to college, I needed to pay for it myself to get myself there. So that way I valued it.
Yeah.
And so they helped me get my business going called Cleo's Cuttings. It's named
I
after my
love
great
it.
grandma, yeah, who
Yeah.
was married to an alfalfa farmer in Canada. And so I did these small hay bales through high school. My junior year, my dad and I invested in what's called a bale baron. So it takes 18
Hmm.
small bales, puts them in a package that makes it easy to move with a hay fork or loader, any situation like that, and fits in the back of a pickup bed. And so that really allowed me to really market myself even more and grow the business quite a bit. So that's how I first got involved with alfalfa, and then it's just become, I mean, it's the main aspect we do as a family farm, but then for me,
Yeah.
that it allowed me to graduate debt free with my undergrad. I was
That's
able to run
awesome.
that in the summers and do it on the weekends. I only live 2 hours from school here in
Nice.
Utah, so works out that I can go help on the farm. But alfalfa just kind of became, I mean, it's kind of a joke even here in the building I work at, Alfalfa Gal. So yeah, for me it's nice because it is kind of a niche crop. I mean, Idaho grows quite a bit of alfalfa, even the area that we're
Sure.
in. Um, but again, led me to the opportunity to specifically be at the high school I was at in Italy, because
Mm.
they have an alfalfa farm on site. And so that was pretty cool to teach and compare how alfalfa is grown in the US to Italy, and that part of Italy actually grows quite a bit of alfalfa for Italy
Mm.
and other parts of Europe as well.
I was gonna say, is that a popular crop over there?
In that area, yeah, that area, and
Okay.
then it's right kind of on the Switzerland border.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's right there. And the climate actually is very
Neat.
similar to
Mm.
where we're at in here in Utah and Idaho. Kind of not, I wouldn't say as low humidity, but they're up in what's called the Dolomites, right by the Swiss Alps. So definitely a higher
Oh, nice.
altitude
Hmm.
to that's conducive for growing alfalfa. So yeah.
Very neat.
Hmm.
That's very cool. So you fell into
Yeah.
FFA kind of accidentally, but then you
Yes,
said you
very
were in
much.
your collegiate FFA team, right?
So yeah, I
Or
actually
did I miss?
kind of I was the state president, state FA president for Idaho.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
again by accident, kind of. My senior year, I was like, well, I want to try this state office thing. We hadn't had a
Yeah.
candidate for like 30 years from my chapter.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
well, I'll try it. Let's like see if I can get through the first cut. So I did,
Oops, did
and I was
it.
like, okay, I made it through the first cut, and
Yeah.
I hadn't even been to the session where they elect state officers, so I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
what that looked like. So all of a sudden, I'm standing in line at the back of this big gym auditorium
Yeah.
situation, and they get through all the names, the first five names, because we have six officers in Idaho. And I was like, oh, that was a good run. Like, that was really cool to be a part of. And all of a sudden they're like, representing Idaho from Shelley. I was like, that's me.
Wait a
And
second.
I'm just standing there with my hands out in front of me, and the current state president had to grab me and run me up there. And I really consider that really kind of was the bow on top for the experience I had in high school was good, but the experience I had as a state officer allowed me to really flourish and see what FFA can truly be, and more importantly, what agricultural education can be. Because I ended up deciding to take the year off, do it full time. So I was able to visit like 60 different high schools in our state. I got
Wow.
to go to South Africa as part of that.
That's
And
so
I don't,
cool.
it was such a great experience
Yeah.
that really set me up for the path I'm on now that I wasn't expecting. And again, going back to kind of what we've talked about even before, just the opportunities that are in ag and for youth in ag, that's probably my heart. not breaks, but it really hurts for the students that I interacted with in Italy because they have such big dreams and they really want to go far and do things, but there's just not the opportunities there and helping them still see their potential and then coming back here to the US and helping students to catch on that they need to have big dreams. It's very interesting and a kind of a fine line to walk as an educator. But yeah,
Mhm.
roundabout answer to that question.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a very neat experience. It makes
Yeah, had
total
never heard
sense.
of
Hmm.
FFA before besides Napoleon Dynamite, you know. So,
Oh, that's too
yeah,
funny. No,
yeah.
I also kind of I didn't fall into FFA. I did like electively take the class, but the whole
Mm,
time I wore my dad's jacket, everything. I
mm,
think he was also secretary, so I was just like, oh, well, it fits, same
yeah.
name, well, not name, but like same last name, everything like that.
Hmm.
So it's perfect.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was a really great experience for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess maybe my only other, which I know you've kind of answered, but you're open to work. Is there any in the perfect dream world, like any position that not necessarily like you have your eye on, but any perfect position that would really love to see yourself step into? Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, the one probably I have probably three. If I have three
Yeah.
that serve different aspects of what I'm passionate about. The first one would be where I student taught. Shout out to Rigby High School,
Oh,
go
yeah.
Trojans. They are the epitome of what an agricultural program is at its finest, taking all three components of the three circle agricultural education model, that classroom, FA, and SAE aspect, and really
Mm.
building students as a whole. I would love to work there as an ag teacher. I would feel so humbled to work alongside those teachers and the good they do for students. That's my dream program, dream ag teaching job, all of that. So shout out to them for really setting me up for success as an educator and how I view things. Lex Godfrey, Robert Hale, and Casey Sanders are the cream of the crop when it comes to ag educators and the good they do. The second job that I think would be super fun and rewarding to do is to work as some sort of role with a state association with FFA. I would
Oh,
love
yeah.
to feed and give back to a state officer team and to work with advisors and to just really serve an association as a whole and recognize the good they can do in that regard. I think that would be really fulfilling for me with the good experience I had in FFA and allowed to give back to that in that regard. And then my final job would probably that would just be fun to do, I think, would be like a social media manager for our farm, just kind of telling our
Honestly, that would
story.
be so fun.
Right? Wouldn't that just be fun?
Yeah, it would
I
be.
haven't had the time. We have an Instagram account for our farm, like our family farm, and I'm in charge of running it. But with school and other things that I'm involved with, I haven't been able to give the time to it. So that is one thing I'm hoping to do for this summer. Not because I want to gain traction or even make money off of it. It would be something that I would just want to do to document what we do and
Yeah.
not have to worry about a paycheck. It would just be fun to take photos
Just
and
tell
make
your
videos.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just for even myself, my brother, and then my parents to see, this is what we've been up to. This is what we've been doing, and just documenting it online in a virtual diary format on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, I should say, not as Facebook as
Yeah.
much. But yeah, those would be my three that serve different purposes to things that I care about.
Very neat. Okay. Well, those were all my questions. Is there anything else I can answer for you?
I don't think so. I guess the one thing I did actually want to ask you is what advice would
Yes.
you give to young
Oh
people
gosh.
interested in agriculture?
Not to play off of what you said, but I think it's just a being open for opportunities. There are a couple of things that, well, actually, let me back up. I was going to say there are a couple things that I think along the way I had said no to that I was going to say I wish I would have said yes to, but I think I am exactly where I'm meant to be at the time that I am meant to be here. So, it all happens for a reason, right? So I think just don't rush anything, just trusting God's timing.
And what I mean when I say
trust God's timing and trust the pace of your life is way back in the day. When I was starting my college career, fall of 2012, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do, where I needed to be, exactly what I needed to be doing, so on and so forth. And there really is no other explanation other than God just has a really funny way of showing us what we actually need to be doing. I at the time I was really embarrassed and really ashamed, but as it turns out, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I'm happy to share with everybody. I started school in 2012, started my bachelor's career journey, what have you, in 2012, and I actually failed out after 6 semesters. I was just not where I wasn't, or I was just not where I was meant to be. And I was so hard headed and just so could not see the bigger picture. And like I said, I was so embarrassed and ashamed and just so crumbled up inside about that. And now looking back, I I will sit here and I will look at my life now and how things have worked out and how there's no other word other than how blessed and humbled I am with how my life has worked out. And my mom and I, she will just call me or she will just text me out of the blue and be like, "Hey, remember that time?" And we just laugh about it because again, there's nothing else to say other than it is the best thing that worked out for me. Failing out of that school is the best thing that worked out for me because if I had not failed out, I wouldn't have turned around and taken 4 classes that summer at a community college and gotten straight A's. That would not have led me to get into Missouri State University and finish my bachelor's and receive my degree in ag communications. That would not have led me then to move to Texas, work for 8 years, and then decide to move to Stephenville and get my master's. And then that would not have led me to where I am today, working for the University of Wyoming Extension. So, like I said, a brutal lesson, but one that had to happen. And when you look back on it, all I can do is laugh and shake my head. So hopefully that makes sense. So,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah.
That when I read through your questions, I was like, oh, I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, that would be my thought.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sadie, thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Well,
yeah.
I was so honored when you reached out. I was like, you want me to be on a podcast? I feel so cool. So thank you for the
No,
opportunity.
I love the stuff that you post on social media. Before we hopped on, I was literally showing our admin assistant. I was like, look at how cool she is. I'm so excited. And she was like, I love the education she posts. So we love your material. So,
Well, thank you. I was really, really humbled and honored to be asked. So thank you
no,
for
thank you.
reaching out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks y'all for tuning into another episode of From the Cowboy State podcast. This was actually our final episode of season 2. So we will see y'all again in the fall for season number 3. Cheers. As a reminder, this is a University of Wyoming Extension podcast. The university is committed to equal opportunity for all persons in
all facets of the university's operations and is an equal opportunity slash affirmative action employer. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this statement, please don't hesitate to reach out to mgetz@uwyo.edu and we can get your questions answered. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the podcast as well, again, don't hesitate to reach out to that email address, mgetz@uwyo.edu. Again, this has been a University of Wyoming Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Funding for this UW Extension program is provided by the John P. Elbogen Foundation, Communities, Agriculture, and Rural Living Project Funds.